Violence and displacement are contributing to a health crisis in Congo, where millions are without access to food and water. Violence against food vendors hits Africa's growing cities where it hurts. And a new video from the dynamic Kenyan performer Winyo. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. Tonight we begin with disturbing news out of Central Africa. One person has tested positive for the Ebola virus in the Northern Democratic Republic of Congo. A spokesman for the World Health Organization says officials declared an Ebola outbreak in Basule province after laboratory tests confirmed the presence of the virus. Christian Lindmeier told VOA the 9 people in the area fell sick with what is currently listed as hemorrhagic fever, and he said 3 people have died. On its Twitter feed, the WHO says it is working with Congo's Ministry of Health to contain the outbreak. Also in the DRC, there is a statistic that is hard to grasp. Now, according to the United Nations, nearly 5,000 people are being forced from their homes every day. The internal displacement is due primarily to a continuing conflict between tribal groups and government troops in the Central Kasai region. The situation has left millions without access to food and water. VOA's Kevin Enox reports.
UN representatives speaking from the Democratic Republic of Congo say over 100,000 people were forced from their homes just last week.
The 1st of January 2016, OCHA estimated that there were 1.6 million IDPs in the Democratic Republic of Congo. 15 months later, at the end of March 2017, as you will see in the fact sheet that's been handed out, we found ourselves with an estimated 3.7 million IDPs in the country.
The UN says the situation is, quote, rapidly deteriorating due to an escalating conflict between government troops and tribal groups. The UN says the number of internally displaced people and the associated lack of food and care is creating a health crisis.
One of the key drivers for this acute level of malnutrition also relates to the overlap between epidemics and the health situation and what's happening in the country. So last year in the DRC, we had to face a cholera epidemic at scale. We had to face a measles epidemic with close to 30,000 proven cases in the former Katanga province. We had an outbreak of yellow fever that required the distribution of some 10.2 million doses of yellow fever vaccine.
Paulson says the violence has left nearly 2 million children under the age of 5 severely malnourished. Kevin Enox, VOA News, Washington.
Well, Somalia and its foreign backers on Thursday signed a security pact at a conference in London. The agreement is being presented as a roadmap towards building a factional national army capable of taking on the fight against al-Shabaab militants. Now, the conference focused on national security, political infrastructure, economic recovery, and combating drought. The terrorist group has lost much of the territory it once controlled in Somalia, including the capital Mogadishu. However, its deadly attacks remain one of the main obstacles to the stability in the chaotic Horn of Africa country. The conference was co-chaired by United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, British Prime Minister Theresa May, and Somalia's President Mohamed Abdullahi Mohamed.
The new partnership agreement is about the people, for the people, and with the people of Somalia. It holds us both accountable through a partnership based on mutual commitments and accountability that binds us all together. It advances our cooperation and coordination by adopting the National Development Plan as our guide on Somali recovery.
Well, at the end of the conference, President Abdullahi Mohamed told the media that the security pact with its partners was affordable, acceptable, and accountable. One of South Sudanese President Salva Kiir on Friday ordered his ousted Army Chief of Staff back to the capital as tensions rose between the 2 men accused of directing the country's civil war. Meanwhile, U.S. Senator Chris Coons, who visited South Sudan and South Sudanese refugees in Uganda last month, speaking at an event at the U.S. Institute of Peace in Washington, D.C., says that the U.S. should use its leverage on South Sudan to force the leadership to bring peace in the troubled country.
We have to find a way towards a meaningful peace process in South Sudan. President Salva Kiir can and should be a part of that process, but so far he has failed to show the leadership we would expect of a president. The United States, I believe, will step up and provide further pressure. Regional heads of state need to be engaged, the AU and the UN as well. If neither of these leaders are willing to take the leadership role that the people of South Sudan deserve, then we may need to find alternative paths to peace.
Well, Senator Coons is a member of the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee. To the south of the continent, Malawi, in cooperation with the United States, hosted this year's African Land Forces Summit. The meeting that wrapped up Thursday brought together military chiefs from across the continent to work on regional cooperation and critical peacekeeping skills. Lamek Masina reports from the Salima district of central Malawi.
This is a simulation of one challenge peacekeepers can encounter: local communities protesting their presence. Soldiers from Malawi Defense Force intervene to demonstrate response measures. After 5 years of training by American and British troops, the MDF is now certified to train its troops and the armies of other nations for international peacekeeping missions. This demonstration was part of the Regional Military Summit in Malawi, facilitated by the U.S. Army.
It is an opportunity for African Command Land Forces commanders to get together, for us to build partnerships, establish friendships and relationships that will benefit us into the future when we do operations and training exercises on the continent of Africa.
Malawian troops demonstrated what they have learned. The tasks include firing and dodging weapons, field maneuvering, and rescue operations.
I've come to know the traditions or some of the things Malawians do, Tanzanians, Botswana, South Africa. So when I leave here and go back to Ghana, I will be able to tell my people as to how Malawians operate.
The Malawi Armed Forces College hosted land force chiefs from 37 African countries. At the summit, they discussed the current challenges like lack of information sharing and building teamwork to tackle threats.
There is greater need to enhance civil-military relations and cooperations, which requires that the military be subordinate to the democratically elected governments.
About 80% of UN peacekeepers are deployed to Africa, but the continent has been moving to take charge of its own security. African regional blocs have deployed troops to respond to the violence and threats in Nigeria, the Central African Republic, and Somalia in recent years. And since 2003, the African Union has been building a rapid reaction standby force numbering 25,000 soldiers. Lamek Masina for VOA News, Salima, Malawi.
Well, back in the United States, it appears that U.S. President Donald Trump is escalating his feud with ousted former FBI Director James Comey, implying there are secret recordings of one of their private conversations from earlier this year. In an early Friday morning tweet, President Trump said, James Comey better hope that there are no tapes of our conversations before he starts leaking to the press. And meanwhile, as viewers, Michael Bowman reports, the FBI's new acting director has contradicted White House claims that Comey had lost the agency's confidence when the president dismissed him.
The White House has offered several reasons for firing the man who oversaw the Russia probe.
Because he wasn't doing a good job.
The rank and file of the FBI had lost confidence in their director.
Not so, according to the new face of the FBI testifying on Capitol Hill.
Director Comey enjoyed broad support within the FBI and still does to this day.
And what of President Donald Trump's letter of dismissal, claiming Comey had informed him on 3 occasions that he is not a target of the Russia probe? senators had questions.
Is it standard practice for the FBI to inform someone that they are not a target of an investigation?
I'm not aware of that being a standard practice.
In an interview with NBC, Trump stuck to his version of events.
I actually asked him, yes. I said, if it's possible, would you let me know, am I under investigation? He said, you are not under investigation.
Democrats, meanwhile, continue to fume over Comey's dismissal.
He was leading an active counterintelligence investigation into any links between the Trump campaign and the Russian government or its representatives. It's hard to avoid the conclusion that the president's decision to remove Director Comey was related to this investigation. And that is truly unacceptable.
Some Republicans have questioned the timing of Comey's firing, but say the president was fully authorized to do so. Even with Comey gone, the FBI insists the investigation will go forward.
The work of the men and women of the FBI continues despite any changes in circumstance.
Comey had been scheduled to testify publicly before the Senate Intelligence Committee Thursday. He has now been invited to testify before the committee next week behind closed doors as a private citizen. Michael Bowman, VOA News, the Capitol.
Well, we want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook, so check us out and share our show with your friends also. And check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Coming up, violence against food vendors on the continent. How the fallout is impacting African cities. Stay with us.
This is BizBeat.
Consumer demand for abalone, also called abalone, has skyrocketed since the 1990s. But the popular hard-shell sea snail, once considered a delicacy so many love to eat, has triggered a growth in illegal fishing. But at the same time, demand has ignited a growth in aquaculture companies, where South Africa leads the way. Peter Britz has studied abalone for 30 years and says most of the sea creatures supplied by farms in South Africa is beating the competition.
And it fetches about double the price of the farmed abalone from Asia.
South Africans farm abalone on land. 10 million liters of seawater are pumped in every hour at this site, and where marketing manager Werner Pike has doubled production every 6 years.
It compares to the best abalone in the world, which is the Japanese abalone.
The global abalone industry has gone from $142 million in 1991 to over $2 billion today. For VOA's BizBeat, I'm Philip Alexio.
Welcome back. Informal food trading is a crucial source of food and income for many people in cities across Africa. But in many places, vendors often find themselves at odds with authorities trying to clean up the inner cities. Over the last decade, city officials in countries like Zimbabwe, South Africa, and Nigeria have launched so-called cleanup operations. Now, these campaigns often result in government shutdowns of informal food markets, traders being arrested and fined, and their goods confiscated. Many informal traders say they're being unfairly targeted and pushed off the streets. Well, so how can Africa's cities fight urban decay without hitting the poor where it hurts most? Here to discuss this with us is Danielle Resnick, a political economist with the International Food Policy Research Institute. Ms. Resnick, welcome to Africa 54.
Thanks for having me, Vincent.
Now, so you know, I really enjoyed living in Africa, enjoyed buying stuff from the streets. It's cool. But the question is, as we just mentioned, how can these cities of Africa that are growing and want to modernize, you know, maintain a clean environment, attract investors, but at the same time be fair to those who want to do small business?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The challenge for African cities is now you have a burgeoning middle class who are interested in transport mobility and clean cities and, of course, safe food. And then you have a huge share of your populations dependent on employment in the informal sector. Predominantly, women in particular are involved in the food sector, and many of the urban poor rely on informal traders for their food source. Yeah. So it's a major challenge to balance these two constituencies for African governments.
And so, you know, governments find it legitimate, of course, to clean up the cities, to maintain streets that, you know, are eco-friendly, but also healthy. So the issue and the big question is, what can be done to balance the act so that everybody has a share? Yeah. What should cities do?
So I think there's a number of approaches. One is infrastructure. Infrastructure for the markets in particular. So providing the toilet facilities, providing the clean water, providing proper circulation, venting in these market environments to ensure that food preparation is done in a safe way, to ensure that people are able to wash their hands when they're preparing food. I think secondly, related to that is an institutional issue where many vendors are paying fees to various authorities, and they don't know how that money is used, and they don't know who's accountable, who they can hold accountable for services. Is it the municipality? Is it the Ministry of Local Government? Is it the Ministry of Health? There's so much overlapping authority over vending, and vendors don't know who to actually hold accountable. So I think making that clearer would be a good first step.
Is there any particular town, any particular city across the continent where you can say governments have done certain things that perhaps could be a model to other countries on how to handle this issue?
There's some small-scale things that have been done, particularly on sensitization of food vendors in terms of food preparation practices. In Nairobi, in Kenya, there was a Dairy Traders Association established in 2009. They worked with informal milk vendors to learn how to safely handle informal, particularly raw milk. And they went through a certification, short training course, receive a kind of visible certificate that is supposed to help them avoid fines from the Kenya Dairy Board. So that's kind of a small-scale example. More broadly, in Dakar in Senegal, the mayor had attempted to try to actually buy up land in Dakar to find a kind of build a proper market with the facilities that I was mentioning.
So it's all about, you know, the cities have to plan deliberately and recognize that there is a sub-economy that millions of people depend on. But very quickly, also, there's a mention that these raids we see in the cities are actually based on certain colonial laws. Can you say anything about that?
Yeah, a number of African governments still have these kind of vending and nuisance bylaws. That's often the name for them, that have existed, you know, since colonial times, when there was a concern of keeping indigenous African populations, you know, outside the city at certain parts of the day, particularly at nighttime. These have been maintained, particularly in your former settler countries in East and Southern Africa. They've been maintained and layered onto, so governments have new laws related to street vending. Municipalities have their own laws, and that creates the confusion. You have both kind of city and national laws and historical laws, and they haven't been reconciled. And of course, particularly illiterate food vendors don't understand what the laws are.
Well, we hope these countries, these cities will keep up with the times and recognize this economy. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Vincent.
Yes. Well, Danielle Resnick is a political economist with the International Food Policy Research Institute. Now, it's time for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54, the latest video from the dynamic Kenya artist Winyo. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In Gambia, citizens demand swift justice for the crimes of fallen dictator Yahya Jammeh's regime. In South Sudan, the UN says war and famine have forced more than 2 million children in South Sudan to seek refuge away from home. In Zambia, the main opposition leader Hakainde Hichilema appears in court over treason charges after he allegedly blocked the president's motorcade earlier this month. In South Africa, 3 students are suspended from Stellenbosch University after hanging right-wing posters depicting Nazi propaganda images across campus. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to Africa 54. Here's what's trending. Mobile bike sharing apps in China bringing the once dwindling population of bikes back with a vengeance to city streets. Now, the competition is proving to be so fierce that subway entrances and sidewalks are now piled high with bicycles, and the roads are seeing an onslaught of cyclists, particularly at peak hours. Like many growing industries attempting to cash in on China's mobile survey consumers, bike-sharing app companies are rapidly expanding across the country. With just a scan of the bike's QR code with a smartphone, you can jet off for a ride that costs just 14 cents. The rental bike can be picked up and dropped off anywhere. Well, next up, in a few years, well-mannered self-driving robotaxis will share these roads with law-breaking human drivers. Now, the project is causing headaches for the people developing the robocars. A self-driving car would be programmed to drive at the speed limit. Now, humans routinely exceed it by 10 to 15 miles per hour. Self-driving cars wouldn't dare cross a double line in the center of the road. Humans do it all the time. Programmers have to figure out human behavior and local traffic idiosyncrasies. Now, teaching a car to use that knowledge will require massive amounts of data and big computing power that is prohibitively expensive at the moment. And finally, Christie's Geneva has showcased a number of jewels poised for auction next week, with the 92-carat heart-shaped La Legende diamond as the standout piece, expected to fetch between $14 million to $18 million. La Legende is billed as the largest diamond of its kind ever to go up for auction. Now, the sale comes as part of a 2-day run of high-profile jewelry auctions in Geneva. Rival Sotheby's is offering up a pair of different-colored diamond earrings as the headline offering for its upcoming auction on Wednesday. And that is what is trending today. That's right, it's time for Friday Music Makers segment. Today we're introducing a new, very brand new music video, Abiro by Kenyan artist Winyo. But you know what? It's featuring Viewers Music Time in Africa host Heather Maxwell. Heather is here with me today in the studio to tell us a little more about this video. Now, I knew about this video, or at least the song you did with Winyo. You have this brand new video. Tell us a little bit, how did you get mixed up in this project?
I got mixed up because I was in Kenya getting music for our programming, interviewing artists, and I met Winyo, and we were just goofing around. You know, I'm a singer, I'm a musician too.
Goofing around? The song sounds great.
Well, that's how the song came about. We first started goofing around, then we went in the studio and got serious.
All right. And it's called Abiro.
Yeah.
I know a little bit about that word. Did you get to understand what it means? It's a Luo word?
Yes.
Meaning?
Coming home.
Coming home.
Yeah.
How about we watch this video and then maybe you talk a little bit about it after. Okay. Let's watch you and Winyo.
Yeah.
Abiro.
jaber akalo Nairobi ya biro akalo Nakuru
I know that he's coming. Oh yeah, he's coming home. I know that my traveler baby's coming home. They saw my baby passing through Mombasa. They saw my Sherry passing through Nairobi. They saw my baby passing through Nakuru. Ooh, my traveling fool.
Look at you. You sound great. Winyo sounds great. And how was it like making this? Did you shoot together all the time, or did you shoot some of it here and they shot some in Nairobi?
That's exactly right. We shot the first part when we composed and recorded the song in 2015 in Nairobi at Kettlebell Music.
Yeah.
And then we released that. They did a studio version. I think we showed some of that in black and white.
Show a bit of that.
But we wanted something more dynamic outside that really told this love story.
Yeah.
And so then we reshot. So we did half of it here in Washington. Those scenes are in Washington, D.C. And then he went to Mombasa and shot more in Nairobi.
Yeah.
And we collaborated with two filmmakers on each side.
Yeah.
And put this thing together.
This is amazing.
Yeah.
And, you know, I like the fact that it's a beautiful, soft song. It does actually have that flavor, not only of Kenyan, but Luo, which is really beautiful. And although he incorporates you, Mzungu,
right,
but it still has the Kenyan flavor. And you did a fantastic job.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is this all, or you're going to collaborate perhaps in more projects in the future?
I definitely hope to collaborate more. It's fun. Collaborating is the best.
Great. You know what? We want to, you know, end the conversation here and see if we can play some more of that video.
Great.
So thanks a lot, Heather,
Thank you.
for yet another fantastic Music Makers segment. To learn more about Heather Maxwell herself and our viewer radio show, visit Facebook and type in the keywords Music Time in Africa. And you can see what time our program can be heard in your area and learn more about some of our featured artists. Well, I want to leave you now with more of Abiro, the music of Winyo, featuring our own Heather Maxwell. Good night.
Akalo Mombasa, biro jaber akalo Nairobi, biro akalo Nakuru.
I know that he's coming. Oh yeah, he's coming home. I know that my traveler baby's coming home. They saw my baby passing through Mombasa. They saw my Sherry passing through.
Welcome to English in a Minute. Most people enjoy listening to music. But is this expression actually about songs and tunes?
Music to my ears.
Jonathan, I cannot believe we have to work over the weekend.
Did you not hear the news? The meeting for the project got canceled. No work this weekend after all.
Awesome! That is music to